Hello guys, and welcome back to another Enshrouded guide. This time we're going to be talking about the Archer class. This is the class that I tend to play with, and thanks to a new weapon in game and also the gems, we can deal out a huge amount of damage with the right loadout. So we're going to break all of that down, and you can see the kind of damage that we are doing here. Pretty awesome. So let's get straight into it and break it all down for you. Before we get into it, just to ensure that it's a fair test, we are keeping everything at 100%. So enemy damage, enemy health, boss health, the important ones. As you can see, this build does a monstrous amount of damage when you get your full crits, with almost 5k per shot. So the first thing that we should look at is the armor that we're using, because that has a huge impact on the build. For this, we are looking to get the most out of our critical strike damage. So with this, you want the Trailblazer hood, as this gives you the 14% critical strike damage plus ranged critical strike chance, which is 16% more. And so the more likely we are to get a critical hit, the more likely we're going to do a huge amount of damage. We then have the Frostbite Slasher chest. I went with this one because it does give me mana, and I do use the Eternal Arrows quite often when I'm not trying to do a huge amount of DPS against, say, the final boss. Obviously, we've gone with the gloves, but we're looking for the one that does the 15% bonus damage against flying foes. I've also gone with the Trailblazer trousers. This is because I like stamina regeneration and stamina. We're going to be using the short bow a lot. We're going to be getting out a lot of arrows very quickly, so this is very useful. And finally, the Frostbite Slasher boots. Again, I've gone with this because the mana regeneration is great for the Eternal Arrows. As for the rings, hands down the best for this build is going to be the Ring of the Ancients, because we're getting an extra dexterity point for both rings, which means that's a total of 10% extra damage. And this comes together along with the food that we've got, which we'll talk about in a moment, to give us range damage of 168%. And then if you can see here, we've got 32 dexterity, which is what's giving us all of that. The other thing that we want to look at is the critical strike chance. So we have 10% base chance plus a further 26% chance, which means if we're lucky, 1 in 3 shots is going to do some kind of critical damage. And the critical damage that we can do is increased by up to 169%. If we attach that with the backstab damage, getting them from behind, we can get a further 65% as well. And so putting these all together, we're getting a huge amount of damage, especially to ranged enemies and ranged flying enemies. Next, let's talk about the food. So for this build, we are trying to maximize our dexterity. So any opportunity that we get to add dexterity to our build, the better. The best drink that you can get at the moment is going to be Milkshake for your archers, because that gives you 4+ dexterity, as well as endurance and stamina recharge, which is fantastic for our class. Then in terms of food or vegetables, we have a +5 dexterity here. And then we're going with a slightly lower level meat. We're going with the chicken soup. It still gives us the +4 constitution, which I think it's the meat stew gives us, but we also get that 1 extra dexterity, and that dexterity point is 5% extra damage, so it is well worth it. And then just to give us a little bit of sustainability, we have that 6+ health regeneration, and again, stamina recharge. On top of this, we are going with the elixir. So this does reduce the amount of time in the shroud, but really that is negligible at the higher levels, but that does offer a huge 30% damage multiplier. So we're trying to get as many multipliers on our build as possible, and we will go through the skills, but let's talk about the weapons, as I'm sure that is something you're interested in hearing about. Originally, I thought the Gem of Focused Light would be really beneficial because it does do a huge amount of bonus damage if you can hit the enemy after you've marked it 3 times. But the problem is, once you've triggered a group of the enemies, it is very difficult to maximize the marks that you have on an enemy, because as soon as one enemy runs in front, you lose that mark like that. And so it works well as an initiator. And so I think the Gem of Focus Light would be good on something like the Wolf Snarl Longbow if it's the first attack that you're doing, or if you're going against maybe a boss character that's not going to be easily hitting you unless it's close to you. The other gem that I've looked at and bow that I've used is what was originally my favorite, which is the Ignited Bow. It does a huge amount of damage, a lot of fire magic damage as well, and with the Gem of Puncturing, which I thought would be the best weapon to use, you can still see it does a huge amount of damage. We're getting 1.6k, easily over 1,000 most of the time. So it's a good build, but with the Gem of Puncturing, it allows you to do extra piercing damage or bonus piercing damage within a set amount of time. This works well if you're playing multiplayer. Unfortunately, not so much in single player, because you're still the only one doing the damage. So with that in mind, I actually ended up going with the Gem of Burning. Now, once this is fully upgraded to level 40, which is the max level gem you can get all items in the game at the moment, you're able to deal 33 damage per second across 6 seconds once triggered. Now, that is a total of just under 200 extra damage for a shot, which means if you don't finish the enemy off immediately with a critical hit, you're still doing a lot of damage, which will probably finish off most of the enemies that you come across, or at least get them down to a point where you can kill them in the next shot. And as for the weapon that I've chosen to go with in the end, even though it's a slightly lower level, it's the Dragon's Wing. This is found doing there's a new quest that you can do called the Dragon's Last Breath. And this is done by finding map pieces within the world. And there is one on top of a dragon skeleton over here, just above Polaris Falls. There's also another one slightly further south in the Skeleton Excavation Camp Mai. And then one to the east, that's Giant Skeleton Orpheus. And the final one in a nest is at Skeleton Excavation Camp Oni. Now, once you've found all 4 of them, you can craft these into a single dragon's map, which will give you the location of a temple. From there are a series of lever puzzles that you have to do right based on these 4 little poems. And once you've done that, you'll be rewarded with the Dragon's Wing. Now, it is a lower level weapon. It's only level 32, but once you upgrade it to level 37, you get the same amount, or even more so, fire damage than the Ignited Bow here. But you also have the Dragon's Strength, and this is specific to this weapon, but you can do an extra 25% damage when you're in mid-air. Now, I'm used to jumping around with my arrows trying to dodge enemies' attacks, so I thought I'd give this a go. And I have found that using these in conjunction with one another can bring out some really high damage. Now that you've seen the build in action, let's just go over the skills that we've got really quickly. We've pretty much gone Soul Ranger build. I've still got a load of points to use, and we could probably flesh these out, but they're not really necessary to the build that we're using. So it might be better, we'll talk about in a moment, going down into a different route. But in short, because we're trying to maintain airtime, we've gone with the double jump so that we can jump higher, and the bee sting so that we can slowly float down whilst aiming at enemies and also give ourselves a little boost to our verticality while fighting. We've also pushed for as many of the dexterity increases as possible, so I think we've got all of them in this tree, and we've done the same for the endurance. The endurance isn't as important, but it does help with the survivability. If we start from this tree, we've gone straight up and we've gone for the critical hit chance. This is super important to us. I've also gone down blessed arrows or blessed arrows so that we can regenerate 20 mana when scoring a critical hit, because when I'm not using the iron arrows, I am using the eternal arrows a lot. In the next tree, we have all of these, which are really beneficial to the marksman. So you have the plus 10% damage with ranged weapons, you have the sharpshooter, which does an additional 20%, and the counter battery against ranged enemies. There's also the flying enemies, the eagle's bane, and skill shots, so that we get a further 20%. And of course, we've gone with ranger, giving us that extra 10% to our stamina and 10% extra damage. While we're at it, more arrows going out at once means more potential damage. So we could double or triple our damage output, which is why we have multi-shot and also multi-shot spread. In the next tree, we're just trying to get the extra dexterity here and the endurance, so the extra stamina. The survivor tree is really useful to us specifically because of the dessert stomach, which allows us that extra food slot, allowing us to get either 5% more damage or the health regeneration and stamina regeneration that we need. And that pretty much covers it in terms of our like key build skills, except for, this is important, the backstab damage over here. And I think there's another one. Yeah, backstab mastery up here, allowing us a further 55% damage from behind. With the 17 other points, if you're playing a bow and dagger character, you might want to go down the finesse, grabbing those 20% extra damage with daggers, and possibly even your slots here, which will increase damage with daggers. However, one thing that I need to try out is if we go down the magic tree, whether Arsonist and Pyromaniac synergizes with the gems, because if so, this might be quite good, because I believe at the moment the bow's magic damage isn't actually changed by these skills, but I could see that being really useful. Or if you want maybe a bit more health regeneration, then heading down here to something like the water aura and waters of life. But guys, that is my little guide on my archer build here. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, please hit the thumbs up. And if you're wondering what to watch next, do check out my guide on farming and let me know in the comments below if you'd like us to cover melee or magic builds next, or perhaps jumping over to our build guides. But guys, until next time, as always, ciao for now.